everybody, and welcome back to another podcast episode of Defense Against the Dark Web. I'm your host, Delilah Schwartz, and today I am thrilled to be joined by two of my wonderful colleagues, Naomi Yusupov and Daniella Reyhanian Ohana. Welcome, Naomi and Daniella. I'm so happy to have you here today.
Thank you.
Before we begin, why don't you both tell me what it is that you actually do with us here at Cybersecurity?
Hi, everyone. My name is Naomi Yusupov. I'm one of the collection team members. I specialize in the Russian and Chinese underground. Basically, what I do is surf on the dark web and find analytic stuff for us to analyze and send our customers, as well as new trends that we as a company can collect.
Cool. So hi, everyone. Thanks for having me, Delilah. I'm Daniella, and I'm the Threat Intelligence Specialist at Cybersecurity for the EMEA and APEC regions. I actually moved into this role quite recently, and before that, I was on the Intelligence Services team, where I was responsible for a lot of research components, threat overview reports, and a lot of research and report writing. But at the moment, I'm sort of the intelligence specialist for prospects and customers. I sort of lead the technical aspects of deals with our customers and prospects, sort of showing them intelligence overviews, guiding them through the cybersecurity portal, showing them lots of different intelligence components and different things like that.
So interestingly, I don't believe that I've ever actually discussed what it is that I do here at Cybersecurity, but my official title is cybersecurity strategist, which is very vague, and I think that's somewhat intentional. My job is essentially to be involved in the strategy in terms of product, in terms of as well what's going on in the wider cyber threat landscape, report writing, analyses, and of course, thought leadership content like this wonderful podcast that I'm very happy to host. But it wasn't my first choice to be working in cyber. And in fact, my career background, or my educational background, I should say, is in political science. I studied counterterrorism and the Middle East. And I know that both Naomi and Daniella also seem to have accidentally fallen into the cyber industry. So I'd love to hear from you guys. And I'll be very excited to share my own strange sort of story of how I got to where I am now. But Naomi, how did you find yourself in the role that you're in today? What did you always want to be in cyber? When did you decide that you wanted to be in cyber? How did you get to be involved in the cyber realm?
As you said, I think I accidentally came to this field, and now I'm very glad for that. So 3 years ago, I had the opportunity to get into the cyber community because of my background in languages. I didn't have any qualification of cyber qualification. I study, my major was East Asian studies, particularly in the Chinese culture and language. So I speak fluent Mandarin. I went to China for university for a couple of times, lived there, experienced the culture and the language. And also thanks to my mom, who that really heavy on me to speak Russian with her. I have Russian native language. So I end up having multiple language and eager to learn new fields. And so I end up in the collection team and start my journey as a cybersecurity analyst. And now when I look back, I'm really glad I had the opportunity to do so, because I think the cybersecurity industry has this learning competition and always evolving and changing. And me as a person who dislikes anything that is not moving, not evolving, and hate jobs that don't have this kind of learning and evolving opportunities, I love cybersecurity in that matter. I can always learn, I can always evolve and study new things. And I have this sort of competition between us, cybersecurity analysts and community, and the underground cyber criminals. We just learn each other and find different kind of ways to tackle each other.
Amazing. What about you, Daniella? How did you get to where you are today?
So I also kind of fell into the world of cybersecurity. I'll give sort of a backtrack about me, I guess. So I'm originally from London. I'm sure that my accent obviously shows that really clearly. And I studied at the University of Birmingham in England. I actually studied international relations and economics. So nothing to do with cybersecurity whatsoever. And I was always sort of interested in Iranian nation state actors, about like the world of politics and cybersecurity, but always just from like a research and geeky perspective, never thinking that would be something I would do in my real world every day. My background also, like my family are from Iran, so I grew up speaking Persian and understanding it. Doesn't impact my work whatsoever nowadays, but it's just like sort of an interest for me. So after university, I graduated and I started working at an Israeli political party, thinking that I would end up in Israeli politics, but that wasn't the right thing for me whatsoever. And then after that, I started working at a different intelligence company, doing sort of more social media discourse analysis and intelligence analysis. And then like I was unemployed for a while, trying to figure out what I was going to do next. And I sort of just was like, okay, like maybe I'll apply for cybersecurity roles or threat intelligence, not having so much experience in the field. But I sort of just mass sent out my CV and landed on something that was really interesting for me. It was sort of my first entry level position into the world of cybersecurity and threat intelligence. And from there, I just sort of learned as much as I could and really threw myself into the field. And again, like nation state actors and the political landscape of cybersecurity has always been an interest of mine. So I guess I always had that at the back of my mind when applying for jobs, and it got me where I am right now.
So interesting, Danielle, because I feel like my trajectory is somewhat similar to yours. So I also probably can tell by my accent, and I feel like I've mentioned this before, but I am Australian originally. I grew up in Australia. At age 18, I came to Israel to join the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces. And my job was not in cyber, it was actually more in operations. But after the army, I went to study political science, counterterrorism, and Middle Eastern studies. I had always been very interested in the dynamics of political extremism and ideological extremism, radicalization, what drives people to think really extremist ideas and perpetrate really horrendous acts. And so I was studying political science, very much focusing on the counterterrorism component, very much focusing on Islamic terror at the beginning. And then in the last year of my degree, I was interning as a research analyst with the International Institute of Counterterrorism, and COVID just broke out. So I wasn't able to actually go in to the Institute at all, not even once throughout my entire internship. And interestingly, they asked me to start looking at what terrorists or extremist sort of individuals were talking about in relation to COVID. And I tried my best, but I cannot speak Arabic or read Arabic. So I thought, okay, I just saw some weird things on the news about some extremist people talking about drinking bleach to get rid of COVID. Maybe I should start looking at the alt-right, which was a big topic of conversation at the time. And I found myself getting involved in the far-right extremist sort of components of the internet. And that included the deep web and the dark web. So I learned how to download the Tor browser, and I had to buy myself a fake German mobile number with Bitcoin so that I could join the white supremacist Telegram groups without them knowing that I was Jewish or living in Israel. My handle was Aryan Barbie, in case anyone was wondering. But I really enjoyed navigating through these like very interesting, very hard to navigate platforms. The dark web was an enigma to me. And then all of a sudden there I was navigating through the various sort of strange communities that exist there and was doing all the collection manually. And at the same time, I was very much interested in the Cambridge Analytica scandal and how these digital mediums had created such massive ideological reverberations and radicalizations in such a large group of people. And a friend of mine asked me if I'd heard of Cyber6Skill, because as I was complaining about how arduous it was to manually collect all these pieces of intel from these different disparate parts of the various layers of the web, he said, oh, you know, there's a company that does that completely automatically. I was like, what? And that's pretty much how I got to Cyber6Skill. I started off as marketing coordinator because I had absolutely zero experience in cyber, but because by training, by my education, I am a research analyst. I researched and wrote lots of research papers examining these sort of political phenomenon and extremist ideologies, and ended up product marketing manager. And now I'm here very much deep in the waters of cybersecurity. And I'm really glad that I am, because Naomi, as you said, I resonate with that as well. It's so dynamic. It's always changing. There are so many new trends and things that just continue to evolve every day, every week. It's crazy to see how we have to continue to adapt and evolve in order to meet the pace of cyber criminals. But it's also really interesting for me to hear how, for the three of us, all of us, cyber wasn't necessarily the first choice. It wasn't what we thought we'd be doing, and yet here we are. So I guess it's interesting as well, because cyber really is a very much male-dominated industry. Daniella and I went recently to an industry conference together at InfoSec, and you look around the sea of faces and it's predominantly men. How is that? Have you guys felt that as well? Has that influenced your experience as a woman in cyber, being, a young woman working in a male-dominated industry? Would love to hear your thoughts on that.
One thing I've sort of noticed whilst being a woman in the field of cybersecurity is that men sort of underestimate your knowledge sometimes.
100%. 100%.
Like underestimate your knowledge and perhaps are much pushier with their agendas than we are.
Yeah.
And that's sort of something that I struggle with a lot. Also with the sort of cultural differences, like sometimes I notice how British I am in these sort of fields and in the workplace. Like I can say things in a much more polite manner perhaps, and like I'm much more gentle with the way that I speak sometimes, like different things like this. And like working in the field of cybersecurity, when it's so male dominated, there are a lot of pushy people around, a lot of people that are pushing their agendas at your expense. And like, that's been really, really difficult for me to work with. And I've had to, again, like cultural differences, teach myself to be less British, or to like be able to like express myself in a way that will get people to back off sometimes, without being rude and without like, exerting too much aggressiveness. But that's been quite difficult. That's for me the hardest part of working in such a male-dominated field.
I agree with that. I think none of you can see us, but all three of us are young women in our late 20s or early 30s, well, late 20s, I think all of us actually. And I feel that as a young woman working in cyber, the amount of times that I'm underestimated, or that it is assumed that I don't know as much as I do, or that it is assumed that someone that is older and a man might know more than me in a particular field of what we're talking about, it happens far too often from my perspective. And what I really enjoy actually is surprising those people and showing them just how much I do know, just how much I do understand the field, and just how much it would be a mistake to underestimate me. But Naomi, have you had a similar experience?
Yeah, I totally agree with you both. I think when I just entered the field as a person who really likes to dress up and make up and like doing all this feminine thing, I came across a lot of people who like judged me before that and like took my femininity, like define how I'm less technical and less cyber knowledgeable. So at first I remember like I tried to disguise myself and not dress as pretty or dressed as like girly at the start of my career.
Wow.
And my boyfriend at the time, now my husband, told me like, you don't need to do that. This is who you are. You like to express yourself with clothes and makeup, and just show them in conversation that you're technical enough, that you have the knowledge. And then, like, as you said, Delilah, blew them off with your knowledge.
I mean, I also relate to that. And I think that's one of the reasons why you and I were such fast friends at the office, because I, like Naomi, I like to wear makeup. I like to dress nicely to the office. And that also can be something that is so interestingly very much judged in the corporate field sometimes, that if you want to be well dressed, if you want to be fashionable, if you want to be fashion forward, if you want to be well put together, makeup, whatever, everybody is different. Every woman is different. And that is that lands with different women in different ways. But femininity is a beautiful thing, and being hyper feminine or comfortable in your femininity and wanting to express that is not an indication of how smart or not smart you are. And I think that when you are fashionable, when you are, make-upped up, if your hair's well done, if you're wearing a nice bag and funky shoes, or even if you're a remotely attractive woman, it's immediately assumed that you are not that smart. And that is something that I think it's not just in the cybersecurity industry, but I think that's something that plagues the entire world, really, in many different fields, unfortunately.
In addition to this, like I remember when we went, like as Delilah mentioned, we recently went to a conference in London, and just sort of like I showed up one day and I saw everyone just sort of wearing like black, boring sort of blazers and these like corporate suits. And I was like, you know what? I'm not going to be wearing something like that. Like that's not me expressing myself. And I showed up with like an orange t-shirt. And like I felt like I was so out of place there, but I was like, I'm not going to let this not express, I'm not going to not express myself in this way. Like it's about being comfortable in who you are as well. And Naomi and Delilah, you both always look fabulous in the office, and it's something that I've noticed, and I
Thank
appreciate that
you.
so much as a woman.
I just think it's really interesting that, appropriate corporate attire is like black and sort of dowdy.
Yeah.
I like to wear a hot pink blazer sometimes to the office, and you can call me cybersecurity Barbie if you'd like. I wouldn't hate it. But another element that I find that's been really interesting, and I know that neither of you can relate quite yet. I am a mum. I have a 5-year-old daughter, and so that obviously has a big impact on my life. I co-parent with her dad, and it works very well. But obviously, I have some, and not some, I have many constraints as to my time, as to my availability, as to my ability to travel, or ability to be available for certain meeting times. And it's been something that I've also had to really learn to manage, because I am a perfectionist and I do like to overgive and overexert. So it's hard for me to say no to a meeting or to a task or to a deadline. But learning to navigate that work-life balance as a mum and as someone that is very committed to my job has been a hard line for me to toe. I don't know when it's appropriate for me to say no. I have sometimes said yes and then burn myself out by the implications of that yes, because ultimately my daughter is my first priority and I should be my second priority. Me, Delilah, should be my second priority. But what often happens is that my work becomes that priority and it takes over from my need for rest, my need for me time and a mental break and my mental health. And that's been something that has been a hard lesson for me to learn. And it's taken some really amazing women to sort of put that into perspective for me. And I can credit some good friends who are working mums. And interestingly, all of my bosses that I've had, direct bosses that have been women, haven't had children. And they're incredibly successful, very impressive women, powerhouses. But I haven't necessarily been able to relate to them as a mum all the time. But for people that haven't been my direct bosses, I've received really valuable advice on knowing how to toe that line and I don't have to apologize for the fact that I'm a mum. I am very proud of the fact that I'm a working mum, and I'm showing my daughter that she can do whatever she wants to do, which is currently a rock star, a famous star. But we'll see how that evolves over time. But are there things that I'm sure you guys also feel the pushes and the pulls of the work-life balance? I know everybody does that. It's not just a female experience, also a male experience. But I'm interested to hear if you guys think that there are certain things that the industry could do, or even just the business world at large could do, to make it easier for women to be in these corporate roles, in order to really encourage women to be able to succeed in such fields. Cybersecurity industry and all industries at large need to be able to understand that women need flexibility in time. When I can be available is dependent on when my kid is going to sleep. And that doesn't mean that I'm not going to be doing the work. Hybrid work, the remote work, and some days in the office and some days at home is wonderful for a working mum. I think that those are really profound and positive steps that the entire business world has been taking that I think will have a massive impact on the barriers of entry for women into these fields. Another thing that I personally experienced when I was doing a lot of my research in the depths of the deep and dark web, not in Cyber Six Skills portal, which I'm very happy sanitizes this kind of content and imagery. But if you're in the platform itself, you're in the deep and dark web, on those Telegram channels or in those dark web forums, there is a lot of misogynistic content and a lot of really just jarring anti-women, the imagery, the memes, the photos, sometimes the commentary. It's violent against women. And that was something that was really hard for me to reconcile. Obviously, as a Jewish woman as well, being in these anti-Semitic forums, it was also very hard for me to see the anti-Semitic sentiments and content that was there. But how have you guys felt as women navigating these platforms and coming across this kind of content and imagery? Has this been something that you've come across?
Yeah, there's a lot of hard content out there. Either it's child pornography or like corpse or disturbing women content, etc. There's a lot out there. And when I started my job, like my boss at the time, like she told me about, you know, you need to shield yourself. This is like the content out there. And before I worked in cyber, I never even knew that there is such horrible content out there, like massive amount of this content. And I think the first ever job that I had was searching for this platform, anti-Semitism platform. I think it was Telegram or like Telegram groups. And I was so shocked as a Jewish woman on the like how much anti-Semitism is still out there. I didn't have any clue that this amount of hate is still out there. Like I felt like in World War II. So it was pretty difficult. And another gender topic that I came across when surfing the dark web is that not a lot of threat actors identify as women. And me as a person, and me as a person, like when I like comment and talk and engage with threat actors, I will also like impose this kind of male character who is talking with those threat actors. And I don't know like why is this trend, why cyber criminals talk in like, as we all assume they're male. One thing I came across, and it was really interesting gender wise.
What about you, Daniella?
Okay, so I think here, like in my role before getting into cybersecurity, I did a lot of sort of social media analysis. So there I was sort of I did see a lot of misogynistic content. There was a lot of it out there, but it was all very sort of PG, I'm gonna say. And then when I started to get into the field of cybersecurity, for lots of like report
underbelly.
Yeah,
yes,
you went to the, I literally went,
yeah,
there's a huge difference in it. And for me, that was the most shocking, like sort of seeing, I don't know, like seeing weapons marketplaces, the human trafficking marketplaces, just different things like that, and the huge variety of horrific and graphic content that is out there. And like, I'm a very sensitive person. I really take these things to heart, and it's super, super difficult for me. So during like the research at the beginning and sort of learning and trying to sort of understand what's really out there in the deep and dark web was extremely jarring at the beginning. And again, like it was very difficult for me to come across and very difficult for me to actually see that there are people like that out there. So I found that really difficult. I can't give a specific point where there was the turning point that it impacted me less, let's say. But again, like in my current role, I'm not sort of on the dark web 24/7 like Naomi is. So I'm not as experienced like I don't experience it on a day-to-day basis. But that turning point when I sort of saw, oh my God, like this sort of stuff is out there was extremely horrifying. And like to a point to this, it's taught me even more about like internet safety.
Yes.
And like in the future with children and like
even
with my parents, like my siblings,
Absolutely.
like to teach them like, guys, like you click on the wrong thing, you're never going to know where you're going to end up. Like you have to be super careful. Like just to teach people about internet hygiene and security is really, really important to me.
Me too, which is actually why this podcast is something that I'm really happy to be hosting, because I think that it's really important for general society to be aware of what's going on in that underbelly. As you said, Daniella, there's a lot that happens on social media and things that upset people that are said very overtly, or maybe less overtly than in other places, but on social media platforms, be it Twitter, be it, you know, these image boards, which are clear web. They do have their dark web equivalent, which can be a little bit more nasty, but they do exist on the clear web. And then we've got the gamer platforms and forums, which often have a lot of misogynistic content. We have incel communities, which exist on both. And for those who don't know what incels are, they are involuntary celibates. Look it up on Google. I'm not going to go into it here. But they have communities that exist on social media. And you think that you've sort of understood the worst of it. And then you go into these platforms where these people are protected by a veil of anonymity and privacy, and they can say what they feel, their true feelings, hidden, latent, or maybe secret feelings under the cloak of anonymity. And suddenly there's no filter, and it just becomes a trillion times darker, a trillion times more horrifying, in all sorts of different ways. And as we mentioned, there's anti-Semitic content, there's, you know, all sorts of pornographic content, children, women, misogynistic commentaries, you know, all sorts of things, human trafficking, weapons. It's really dark. And I think for women who usually, those that identify as female or feminine leaning individuals, tend to be somewhat more empathetic, more sensitive, as a massive generalization. And of course, this isn't right for everybody. But I think it definitely plays a part in why many women might not necessarily feel a pull to be putting themselves in those spaces or exposing themselves to those spaces at all. And I can really understand that. And I get it. But I think it's really important as well, because I do think that we as women bring a lot of skills to the table that are valuable skills. We are very perceptive. We have emotional intelligence. I'm not saying that men don't. I feel as if we do bring a lot to the table that is very valuable to the field. And I personally can say that there are certain times where, simply because of the way my brain operates as a woman, I see something differently than one of my colleagues or offer an alternative perspective. How have you guys experienced any differences in the way that you guys conduct your work as opposed to your male colleagues that do the same job?
Me as a person, I find my creativity and thinking out of the box my certain strength. So even if I'm not particularly have the best experience in cyber, but I'm able to learn fast and adapt and like thinking out of the box and be creative with my work, that really helped me at like the start of my career. And I advise women out there, if you're listening and you're at the start of your career, because most of the times, and research also support this idea, that women usually don't apply to jobs if they don't have all the skills and all the qualifications for the job description. So don't do that, okay? If you're listening to this, please just grab this chance. If you have the potential, if you have some of the skills out there and you think you are able to learn fast and adapt and evolve, you just need one chance, to someone to believe in you, and you're good to go. So please apply to this job if you're listening and hesitating.
Yeah, fantastic.
So
yeah.
That is so true. And I feel like, especially for the three of us, I think that all of us can really identify someone that noticed our talents or skills or potential and invited us to take a seat at a table that we wouldn't have necessarily thought we had the opportunity to join in the first place. And it is something that is very endemic with women, that, you know, a man will look at a job, say, I don't know all the skills, and be like, oh yeah, I'll just apply anyway. Like, I can do it. It's great. I'll just, you know, waffle my way through it. And we're like, oh no, they say that I also need to know, you know, this particular coding language, and I only know the 3 other ones. So I guess I can't apply to this job. Why do women do this
That's
to
horrible,
ourselves?
but it's true.
I
know.
So
but,
true.
You know,
so true.
I mean, it's funny to tie in the Barbie movie to a women in cybersecurity podcast, but why not? I did reference myself earlier, a cybersecurity Barbie. There is a particular point in the movie where one of the characters sort of makes a comment that she's not exceptional, and that's like that she's not enough because she's not exceptional. And since when is that the standard, that we have to be exceptional all the time at everything in order to be?
But I think this is the standard, or the standard we were taught when we were like young. You need to be perfect. You need to be the perfect mom and the perfect boss and the perfect employee and the perfect, I don't know, daughter or wife. Yeah. So it is kind of social expectation. I hope we're breaking it by now, and our daughters won't have to be like in this sort of stress all the time. But I do agree that this is the situation, unfortunately, out there.
Yeah.
And like adding on to that, there's like a lot of the feeling of the imposter syndrome. Like I have it a lot. I completely and utterly suffer with that. And like that for me is really, really hard, because again, I really do not want to generalize, but I want to say this, that I feel like it's much more common across women than it is with men, because men do have that sort of mentality of like, okay, I don't tick everything on the job description, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to apply anyway, and I'll just roll with it and see how it goes. So for me, like managing the aspect of the imposter syndrome is really hard on a day-to-day basis, especially working in such a male-dominated field. And like, with my first job in cybersecurity, I was working also at Cyber Six Skill. There's a lot of people that came from like the intelligence background in the army. So there's a lot of that, like, I don't even know how to phrase this, that sort of like man background, and like they all have these inside jokes from their experience in the army and different things like
I totally understand.
Yeah, it's so hard. That for me, like a Brit working in that environment with no background in that whatsoever, that was extremely hard at the beginning as well.
It's really interesting to see how I do feel like we're evolving as a society at large in terms of helping women break through the glass ceiling in all fields, not just in cybersecurity, but in all fields. But I do still think that we have quite a long way to go. And I think that that has a lot to do with the societal pressures that we just discussed, because it's this multiple lives. I mean, I had a conversation with a good friend of mine the other day who is got two young daughters. One of them is almost 3 and one of them is 1 year old, and she's also working full time. And she was worried that she wasn't reaching her potential as she should yet, that she's not where she should be. She's not doing something that's impressive enough, or that she's not progressing in her career as she would have liked. And I had to remind her that she actually has 2 full-time jobs, or even 3, because she's very happily married. So she's a wife, which is a job in itself. She's
100%.
She's a mother to two young girls, which is definitely a full-time job and probably the most unforgiving job that there is, and working full-time in her professional career. So there's a lot going on for her, and yet she's still holding herself to this impossible standard of wanting to be perfect in every way, wanting to be a perfect mother, wanting to have the perfect relationship, wanting to have the perfect career. And I really don't think that men feel those pressures in the same way that women do. I don't know why. I don't know if it's because it's only relatively recent, that we've entered the workforce and we've been expected to be both mum and wife and career power lady. But I really don't think that men have those same experiences as women in that reality. And also, frankly, men don't have to take a pause on their career for a certain period of time to get pregnant. So true. Have a baby, recover from having a baby, which is huge, and then enter into a new phase of your life and completely alchemized identity from an individual human being into a mother who has another human life completely dependent on you in order to survive. These are huge things. And then women, and we can look at the United States as an example, very little maternity leave. I'm very grateful that in Israel we have a better situation, but short maternity leave, not a lot of support in that regard. And these are huge life changes that men don't even have to consider. When is the best time for me to have a kid? Whatever. They don't have to take a break. They can. And many men do step up to the plate, and they do. But it's the women that also have to rehabilitate their body. And then continue to manage it afterwards. And it's if you want to have more than one kid, it's multiple interruptions to your career trajectory. Sometimes if it's a difficult labor, or if you've had complications, or sometimes you need to be, hospitalized for a certain period of time because whatever, how do you then recover? How do you catch up to your male counterparts that are performing the same job, most likely with a slightly higher salary? What is it, like 75 cents to the dollar? And they're just keeping on going, and we have to take a pause. Those are things that have impact on our careers, on our experiences as career women and as mothers. It's complex. It's complex. I don't know what the answer is, how we help to, lessen those pressures on women. But I think it begins with actually acknowledging that those pressures exist and that they have an impact on women in cybersecurity and in every other industry.
Yeah, I totally agree. If I can say one thing that bothers me for every man out there, since I got married half a year ago, everybody asks me and have this little jokes about when I want to become a mother, and
that's none of their business.
Inappropriate. Yeah,
so inappropriate. Yeah.
So please stop if you think it's funny to ask just recent married women if they're planning on having a baby, or they have a baby fever. Don't do that.
Some women don't want kids, and it's completely valid as well.
Fine. Yeah, it's none of your business. And I don't think men ask recently married men about
Yeah,
those.
they don't. For sure, they don't.
So
For sure they don't. Yeah, it's also really interesting having been, I was married to my daughter's father. We are no longer married. We divorced. And it was also interesting for me to experience how how my interactions with men, be it at the workforce or anywhere else, changed after my divorce. As a single woman, all of a sudden, the way that people interacted with me, the way that people joked around with me, the in-office jokes, sometimes, those sort of interactions. It's been a very strange thing for me to navigate and work through. I was married for 7 years almost to my daughter's father, and all of a sudden having to navigate a world where I was working and no longer married, and as a single woman in a male-dominated field, it's a very hard one to navigate, to know also if you're uncomfortable by a comment, when is it appropriate to speak out and say, actually, that really bothered me and that made me feel uncomfortable and that crossed a line? And when is that, but I don't want to say that to that person. I work with them every day. I don't want to hurt his feelings. He didn't mean it. He just said it, he was trying to joke around, but I felt uncomfortable.
Yeah. And also I think like one of the dilemmas of women commenting on that is that I'm not like, I don't want to sound like a very sensitive woman, like just slide it off. So yeah, I totally understand.
It's interesting because I did have an experience like that I really had to think about whether or not it was going to be appropriate for me to say something or not, because I also didn't want to come off as sensitive, or I didn't want to come off as having, I understood that the intention wasn't there, but I was the one that felt uncomfortable. So is it my problem? Is it their problem? It's very hard as a woman in the corporate world to sort of know, okay, but I also want to be inside the boys' club. Like, I want to be in with the boys. I want to be cool enough for them to joke around with, because if I'm in with the boys' club, that will also help me with my career. Networking 101, you want to be joking and laughing around like with your coworkers or prospects or clients or whoever, your executives, it doesn't matter. But as a woman, sometimes what goes on in those conversations in that boys' club can be confronting, can be uncomfortable. And I know that many people will say, oh, we've moved on, it's not like that anymore. I'm sorry to let you know, it is. It continues. It's maybe a little bit more aware and slightly less overt and a little bit more, subtle with the way that they go about it. But women in the corporate world can all attest to sometimes feeling uncomfortable in those dynamics. And I think that also it's important for men to understand that even if you do not have an intention to, you're not trying to hit on this woman, you're not trying to do something untoward, even your comments and your jokes can cause discomfort. And that is something that I think men don't understand. Like, oh, but I wasn't hitting on you. It doesn't matter. It still
That's
made
the
me feel
worst when they say that. That's the worst. Yeah.
You still felt at liberty to make a comment about my body in a corporate environment, in a working environment. That is inappropriate and uncomfortable. Please don't do that again. So for all the men listening, please don't do that. I would like to ask a couple more questions on the cybersecurity industry at large. And as women with unique perspectives, would love to hear your thoughts on what developments or innovations or trends or anything really in your field that you're looking out for, that you're excited about, concerned about, focused on.
From a research perspective, I'm always sort of really interested to see the trends, like as I said, of nation state actors in the realm of cybersecurity and the political landscape. So I did a lot of research on the Russia-Ukraine war and the impact of different threat actors from Russia, for example, like pro-Russian threat actors. So for me, that was sort of geekily fascinating, I'm going to say. So for me, I love to sort of
here.
Yeah, I know I am the right audience right here. So for me, like, I love to see the developments in the field of threat actors and the different tactics they're using to sort of protect their nation state interests and different things like that. So like what's going on with the latest trends in ransomware attacks or DDoS attacks, or where they're sort of speaking about the next attacks that they're going to do, the tactics they're going to be utilizing, and yeah, just being obsessed with following these sort of things on their different underground forums and Telegram and the developments in how they change their behavior.
Naomi and I actually just had a chat recently about that as well, and also about Naomi obviously spoke earlier about her fluency in Mandarin and Russian, so she's been closely following these two communities. And we have a podcast episode as well that will be out regarding how the different evolutions that she's observed as she navigates the deep and dark web and the Chinese and Russian cybercriminal communities. I also find the sort of nexus between what's going on above ground in the political arena, how it sort of is very much mirrored and paralleled by what happens on the underground, and how the geopolitical factors or the other factors that are affecting our global experience of humankind on a global scale are also very much affecting the cybercriminal underground and how threat actors are operating. I'm also very much keeping my eye on and interested in how AI is going to continue to emerge, not only as a tool for cybercrime, but also as a target, be it through the adversarial sort of obfuscation attacks and data poisoning and all those sorts of things. I'm really looking forward to see how the use of AI on the underground, not only the use of harnessing its capabilities in order to conduct cybercriminal operations, but also as a vector for attack, is going to be really, really interesting. So I'm keeping my eyes peeled for all of the developments that are happening in that arena. Before we do close off, I also want to give a big shout out to some of the amazing women that we personally work with. At Cyber6 we're very lucky to have pretty much 50-50, I think, men and women, almost 50-50 men and women at our company. We have incredible women in our executive leadership team. Our CMO, Tracy Moon, is an absolute powerhouse and is an inspiration to me personally. We also have an incredible VP of R&D, our research and development lead is an incredible woman, Daphna. And also we have our head of finance, Dikla, our head of HR, Hadar. All of these are incredible women who are very much shaping the way that our company operates and leading both men and women in the various ways that our product, our company is developing and evolving, and their leadership is inspiring for me personally. And I love seeing all the other women that are really kicking ass in the world of cybersecurity. And I'm excited to see how that continues to, how women's presence in cybersecurity continues to grow. Are there any comments that you guys want to make regarding women in the field, what the camaraderie is like, support for each other, and I guess also what you find most rewarding and satisfying about being a woman in cyber?
In my experience, I had a lot of female mentors along the way when I didn't have any cybersecurity background, and I tried to have in my grasp a female mentor who can share her experience with me and navigate me along my journey. And I hope like when we evolve and get to like higher leading positions, we as women can support other women in their start of their journey and be a mentor for them. I think like if you're a woman or you don't support women, I think it's the worst kind. So don't do that. And promote other women and give them the chance, see their potential. This is really important to me. And I hope one day I'll become a mentor as I was like at my beginning.
Yeah, amazing. That's beautiful.
I think for me, the most rewarding thing about being a woman working in cybersecurity is having the answer to solutions when other people don't. Like being the one that sort of comes up with, I don't know, the technical answer, and being on a Zoom call with 10 men and then being the one that's sort of leading the call and providing the solutions to their answers and showing them sort of the cool intelligence that they're looking for, a new way of thinking. That always gives me so much satisfaction. And I leave the meeting being like, wow, Daniella, you really killed that. Like having more feelings like that and giving more women the space to feel like that. And like, as Naomi said, I'd love to be a mentor one day to another woman sort of starting out in the field of cybersecurity. And yeah, just for her to feel like the way I feel sometimes.
Yeah, that's amazing and such a beautiful prospect for the future of women in cyber. If we have leaders and mentors like the two of you, we are in really good hands, and it's very promising for the future of cyber and breaking that glass ceiling as a woman in cyber. I share that sentiment, and I guess if you are a young woman that is interested in pursuing a career in cyber, then you might feel free to reach out to myself, to Naomi, and to Daniella to hear our thoughts, our opinions, our experiences more further, to sort of help you along your journey as you're deciding if this is a career that you would like to pursue. And I guess the thing that I would like to finish off on as well is that I am excited for women to keep surprising each other and ourselves and our peers with just how successful we can be in this field. There was a long time where there was this large assumption that women were not as technically adept. They shouldn't be doing the computer sciencey kind of thing. We have women on our R&D team. We have women on the intelligence team, women in finance, women in marketing, women in literally every department. We have women in all sorts of different fields and departments of our organization, whether it be, the copywriters and marketing team to product managers, R&D, finance, whatever else it might be. And I think that we are very much proving the world wrong by showing them just how great we are at our jobs. And I'd love to continue surprising people by just showing everybody just how great women are, because we really are fabulous individuals. And I hope that our role and our experience in cyber continues to grow and evolve to become more inclusive, more equal, that the glass ceiling gets a little bit thinner and easier for us to break through as we move along our career journey. And I'm excited about the prospects for the future. I would like to wish you both happy International Women in Cyber Day. You are two of my favorite women in cyber, and I am honored to work with both of you, talented, inspiring, and smart, competent women. And thank you for joining me today.
Thank you.
And until next time, to our listeners, join us again on the next episode of Defense Against the Dark Web. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.